You are entering a time where cybersecurity is no longer only about stopping the threats you can see today. It is also about preparing for the threats that may change the meaning of security in the years ahead. Quantum computing is one of those shifts. It sounds futuristic, and for many people, it still feels far away. But its long term impact on cryptography is serious enough that you cannot ignore it. The reason is simple. Much of the secure digital world around you depends on mathematical protection methods that classical computers find extremely difficult to break. If quantum computing becomes powerful enough in the future, some of those protections may no longer hold the way they do today. This does not mean your security collapses tomorrow morning. It does not mean every encrypted system suddenly becomes useless. But it does mean that the assumptions behind many trusted systems may need to change. That is why you should start thinking about quantum risk as a practical security planning issue, not just as an academic or research topic. In this session, you will walk through the real risk, the systems that are most exposed, and the practical actions organizations can begin taking now without panic and without overreacting. Quantum computing is not just a future science topic. It is a long-term security planning issue you should understand today. At first glance, quantum cryptography risk can seem like something you can postpone for many years. You may think that if the technology is not fully operational yet, there is no reason to worry now. But that way of thinking misses the real problem. The risk is not only about the moment when powerful quantum computers arrive. The risk is also about the value of the data being stolen, copied, or intercepted right now. If an attacker can collect encrypted data today and store it for the future, that data may still have value when better quantum capabilities eventually appear. This is why the topic matters now. Some information is only sensitive for a short time, but other information must remain confidential for many years. Think about intellectual property, legal records, sensitive financial information, government communications, health data, critical infrastructure details, research results, or business strategy documents. If those are stolen today in encrypted form, the damage may come much later. So the real issue is not just whether current systems are secure in the present. It is whether the data you protect today will still be protected in the future. Quantum risk matters now because data stolen today may still be valuable enough to decrypt years later. Before you can fully understand the risk, you need to understand how deeply cryptography is connected to the digital world around you. You use cryptography every day, often without noticing it. When you visit a secure website, cryptography helps protect the connection. When you log into a system using trusted certificates, cryptography helps prove identity. When software is signed, cryptography helps confirm that the code is genuine and has not been tampered with. When organizations run secure remote access, secure application programming interfaces, protected transactions, and trusted device communication, cryptography is quietly working in the background. Much of this security depends on public key cryptography. This includes well-known methods such as Rivest-Shamir-Adleman, Elliptic Curve Cryptography, and Diffie-Hellman key exchange. These methods are trusted because they depend on mathematical problems that classical computers find extremely hard to solve efficiently. That difficulty is what has made them reliable for so long. In simple terms, they are safe because breaking them with normal computers is considered unrealistic within a practical time frame. Modern digital trust depends heavily on public key cryptography that classical computers cannot easily break. Now you can start to see why quantum computing creates concern. A quantum computer is not just a faster normal computer. It works differently. Because of that different model, certain mathematical problems that are very difficult for classical systems may become much easier for sufficiently powerful quantum systems to solve. This is especially important for public key cryptographic systems. One of the most discussed ideas in this space is Shor's algorithm. In simple terms, this is a quantum algorithm that could theoretically solve the kind of mathematical problems that support systems like Rivest-Shamir-Adleman and elliptic curve cryptography much more efficiently than classical computers can. If that capability becomes practical at scale, many of the cryptographic foundations that support secure communication, digital certificates, software signing, and key exchange would need to be replaced or significantly updated. You do not need to become a mathematician to understand the business impact. The important point is that some of the digital trust systems you rely on today were built on assumptions that quantum computing may challenge in the future. Quantum computing matters because it could break some of the mathematical foundations behind today's public key security. This is where the risk becomes much easier to understand in practical terms. Attackers do not need to wait for quantum computers to become powerful before they begin taking advantage of the future. They can collect encrypted data now, keep it stored, and wait for a time when future technology may allow them to decrypt it. This is known as harvest now, decrypt later. That phrase is extremely important because it changes your timeline for action. If an organization believes quantum risk only begins on the day quantum computers become powerful enough, it is already thinking too late. Sensitive data may already have been copied and stored by attackers years before that point. Once that happens, your present-day encryption may only be delaying disclosure, not preventing it forever. This creates a very different kind of risk profile from many common cyber threats. Usually, you worry about immediate compromise. Here, you are also worrying about delayed compromise. That is why leaders, architects, and security teams need to think about future confidentiality now, especially for information that stays valuable over long periods. Attackers may be collecting encrypted data today, so they can try to decrypt it in the future. Not all data carries the same level of quantum-related risk. The greatest concern is not short-lived information that becomes irrelevant in a few hours, days, or weeks. The greatest concern is data that must remain confidential for 10, 20, or even 30 years. That is the kind of data most exposed to the harvest now, decrypt later problem. Think about engineering designs, strategic plans, medical records, government documents, intellectual property, legal archives, merger and acquisition information, or critical infrastructure architecture. These are not short-term secrets. They can stay sensitive for a very long time. If attackers steal them in encrypted form now, the damage may come much later, but it could still be severe. This means your prioritization should not begin with everything at once. It should begin with understanding which data matters the longest. When you know that, you can make smarter decisions about which systems, processes, and storage environments deserve the earliest attention in your quantum readiness efforts. The longer your data must remain confidential, the more important quantum readiness becomes. One of the first areas you should focus on is the trust layer built around public key infrastructure, digital certificates, and transport layer security. These elements sit at the center of modern digital trust. They protect websites, application communication, secure email, identity systems, application programming interfaces, and service-to-service communication. In many organizations, they are everywhere, even if many people do not realize how deeply they are embedded. If your certificate environment is large, fragmented, or poorly documented, future transition may become difficult. If your transport layer security implementations are spread across cloud services, internal applications, edge systems, gateways, and vendor platforms, even a small change may affect many systems at once. That is why you need visibility into where certificates are used, who owns them, how they are managed, and how easily they can be replaced or updated. Public key infrastructure and transport layer security are core trust layers that must be understood early. Virtual private networks and secure connectivity platforms also deserve attention because they often rely on cryptographic methods for authentication, trust establishment, and key exchange. Many organizations still depend on these systems for remote access, hybrid connectivity, branch communication, and protected access to internal resources. If your connectivity model relies on static or vendor-specific cryptographic implementations, future change may not be simple. You may need to coordinate across networking teams, architecture teams, vendor providers, and security teams just to understand what is currently in place. In some cases, the challenge may not be the technology itself, but the operational complexity of changing it without causing business disruption. So when you think about quantum risk, do not only think about websites and certificates. Think about the hidden trust models in your network connectivity. They matter just as much, especially in large or distributed environments. Secure connectivity systems may also need future cryptographic transition, especially when they use rigid or vendor-specific designs. Now move your attention to software signing, firmware trust, and identity systems. These areas may look different on the surface, but they are all deeply connected through digital trust. Software signing helps prove that code, updates, and packages come from a trusted source and have not been altered. Firmware signing protects device trust. Identity systems rely on certificates, secure federation, machine identities, token exchange, and protected authentication flows. If the cryptographic foundations behind these systems change in the future, all of them may require careful transition planning. This matters because trust in code and trust in identity are both central to modern operations. Development pipelines, release processes, firmware update systems, application access, cloud identity, remote access, and administrative control planes all rely on cryptographic assurance. In many organizations, these areas are spread across multiple teams and tools, which can make future change harder than expected. That is why software signing, firmware trust, and identity should be treated as high priority areas in your early readiness planning. Trust in code and trust in identity are both central to quantum readiness planning. Stored data is one of the clearest areas of concern because it directly connects to long-term confidentiality. Many organizations have archives, backups, legal repositories, research stores, document vaults, and historical databases that are encrypted and retained for years. At first, this sounds reassuring because encryption is in place. But the key question is whether that encryption will still provide the same protection far into the future. If long-term archives are copied today, attackers may simply wait. That is what makes stored encrypted data so important in this discussion. You are not just protecting data in motion. You are protecting data that may remain valuable for a very long time. In some cases, the archive itself may outlive the cryptographic confidence behind it. This means storage and retention strategies need closer review. You need to know what is stored, why it is retained, how long it must remain confidential, and whether all that data genuinely needs to exist in the first place. Sometimes better risk management begins not with stronger encryption, but with smarter retention decisions. Long-term encrypted storage can become a future target if attackers collect valuable archives today and wait to decrypt them later. At this point, you may think future transition is simply a matter of replacing one algorithm with another. In reality, some organizations will struggle far more than others because their environments are more rigid, more fragmented, and less visible. The hardest part is often not the new algorithm itself. The hardest part is everything around it. Many organizations have cryptography hidden inside legacy applications, vendor products, network appliances, mobile applications, middleware, hardware modules, and custom integration layers. Sometimes nobody fully owns it. Sometimes nobody has a complete inventory. Sometimes the original designers are gone. In those cases, future change can be slow, expensive, and risky. That is why the biggest challenge is often transition readiness, not technical theory. If your organization has poor visibility, unclear ownership, and tightly coupled systems, the future quantum shift could become an operational burden. That is exactly why preparation should begin before urgency arrives. The greatest risk for many organizations is not just cryptographic exposure, but the difficulty of changing complex and hidden systems later. One of the smartest actions you can take right now is to build a cryptographic inventory. That means identifying where cryptography is used across your applications, networks, identity systems, devices, storage platforms, certificates, software pipelines, and trusted communications. You want to know what is in use, where it sits, who owns it, what business process depends on it, and how difficult it would be to change. This does not need to begin as a perfect exercise. It just needs to begin in a structured way. Start by identifying critical systems first. Look at certificate usage, signing processes, secure communications, authentication flows, encryption libraries, and long-term data stores. Bring together architecture, security, infrastructure, application, and vendor management teams so the picture becomes clearer over time. Without visibility, quantum readiness is only guesswork. With visibility, it becomes a manageable planning effort. You cannot modernize what you do not understand. A cryptographic inventory gives you the visibility needed to plan future transition in a calm and structured way. After visibility comes flexibility. Cryptographic agility means designing systems so that cryptographic methods can be updated or replaced without rebuilding the entire environment. This is one of the most practical and valuable ideas in the whole discussion because it reduces long-term risk without forcing immediate replacement. If your systems are designed with hard-coded cryptographic assumptions, every future change becomes painful. But if your systems use modular designs, clear abstraction layers, standards-based approaches, and configurable security controls, change becomes far easier. This is not only good for quantum readiness, it is good security architecture in general. When reviewing platforms, applications, or vendor products, you should ask whether they can support future cryptographic transition without major redesign. Can certificates be updated easily? Can cryptographic libraries evolve? Can protocols be changed with limited disruption? Those are the kinds of architecture questions that help you prepare wisely. Cryptographic agility makes future change easier by ensuring your systems are not trapped by rigid security designs. Preparation does not mean rushing to replace everything immediately. It means paying attention to where standards and vendor support are going. Post-quantum cryptography is evolving, and organizations should track those developments carefully. You do not need to invent your own new cryptographic future. You need to understand which standards are emerging and how trusted technology providers are planning to support them. This is where vendor management becomes important. Your cloud platforms, networking providers, security vendors, identity providers, hardware suppliers, and software partners will all play a role in how smoothly your organization can adapt. If vendors have no clear roadmap, that may become a future risk. If they are actively preparing, you gain more confidence in your transition path. So make this a governance habit. Monitor standards bodies. Watch product announcements. Ask direct questions during procurement and architecture review. Bring this discussion into leadership forums instead of leaving it hidden in technical corners. The right response is not panic migration, but careful tracking of trusted standards and vendor readiness. Once you begin to understand your environment, you need to decide where to focus first. The best starting point is your most sensitive data with the longest confidentiality requirement. This helps you avoid trying to solve everything at once and instead focus effort where future exposure is highest. Ask practical questions. Which data would still be damaging if exposed in 10 years? Which archives are legally or operationally required to remain protected for decades? Which designs, contracts, records, or strategic documents represent long-term value? Which systems hold data that attackers would gladly store and wait to decrypt in the future? This kind of prioritization helps leaders make better investment decisions. It also helps technical teams know where early analysis and mitigation efforts should go. Not every system needs the same urgency. The long-life data problem should guide your priorities. Focus first on the data that stays sensitive the longest, because that is where future quantum exposure matters most. Sometimes, the most practical mitigation is not dramatic. Stronger key management and smarter data retention can reduce risk even before large-scale cryptographic migration becomes necessary. These are simple topics, but they are powerful because they directly reduce exposure. Good key management helps you control how encryption keys are created, stored, rotated, protected, and retired. If your key processes are weak, future transition becomes harder and present-day protection may already be weaker than it should be. At the same time, better data retention decisions help reduce the amount of valuable material that could be collected and stored by attackers. Many organizations keep sensitive data for too long simply because nobody wants to challenge old retention habits. But unnecessary retention increases risk. If information no longer needs to exist, keeping it only increases the future impact of possible theft. So, quantum readiness is not only about new algorithms, it is also about reducing the long-term value of the data an attacker might one day decrypt. Better key management and reduced unnecessary retention can lower quantum-related exposure starting right now. Quantum risk should not remain a niche topic discussed only by researchers or specialist engineers. It belongs in governance, architecture planning, procurement, security strategy, risk management, and long-term transformation decisions. That is how organizations become ready without becoming reactive. When major systems are selected, designed, or renewed, quantum readiness should be one of the questions on the table. When vendors are evaluated, their future cryptographic support should be discussed. When data protection policies are reviewed, long-term confidentiality should be considered. When security roadmaps are developed, quantum readiness should appear as a practical planning theme rather than an ignored future issue. This approach creates maturity. It means the organization gradually prepares through normal decision-making processes instead of waiting for an emergency program later. Good governance turns a future disruption into a planned evolution. Quantum readiness becomes practical when it is built into strategy, governance, procurement, and architecture decisions. One of the biggest leadership challenges is explaining this topic without creating confusion or fear. If you speak about it like an immediate disaster, people may dismiss it as hype. If you speak about it as something too distant to matter, people may ignore it completely. The right message is balanced. You should explain that modern cryptography still matters and still protects organizations today. At the same time, you should explain that some commonly used public key systems face a credible long-term challenge from quantum computing. The action required now is not panic replacement, it is readiness. That means visibility, agility, vendor awareness, long-term data prioritization, and governance integration. This kind of communication helps leaders understand why the topic deserves attention now, without making them feel that all current investments are suddenly worthless. Clarity builds confidence. Panic creates noise. The best way to discuss quantum risk is with balance, clarity, and practical focus rather than fear. A well-prepared organization does not need to be perfect. It just needs to be moving in the right direction. Good preparation means you understand where cryptography is used, which systems are most exposed, which data has the longest confidentiality need, and which vendors are credible partners for future change. It means you are improving cryptographic agility, strengthening governance, and reducing unnecessary retention of sensitive information. It also means the topic is no longer hidden. Leaders understand the issue. Architects include it in design thinking. Procurement teams ask better questions. Security teams track relevant developments. Application and infrastructure teams know that cryptographic flexibility matters. Over time, that shared awareness becomes an advantage. As you step back and look at the full picture, one idea should stay with you. Quantum computing does not mean modern cryptography suddenly becomes useless today, but it does mean the security life of some current cryptographic models may not be as long as many organizations once assumed. That changes how you think about the future. It changes how you plan. And it changes how you protect data that must remain confidential for many years. The organizations that respond well will not be the ones that panic first. They will be the ones that prepare early. They will build a cryptographic inventory, design for agility, track standards, engage vendors, prioritize long-lived data, strengthen key management, and integrate quantum readiness into governance. That is how you turn a complex future challenge into a manageable security journey. Good preparation is about steady readiness, clear visibility, and smart decision making across the organization. If this session helped you understand quantum cryptography risk in a practical and easy way, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share it with others who want to prepare for the future of cybersecurity without getting lost in hype. Leave a comment and share how you think organizations should begin their quantum readiness journey. Your thoughts may help others see this topic more clearly and take their first practical step. Learning together and sharing practical ideas helps more people prepare early for the future of security.